Welcome to Section 4, Deploying Cloud-Native Applications to the Cloud. In this last section, we will create our end-to-end CI/CD workflow and deploy our cloud-native application to GKE. You will also learn about scaling the application with the kube-controlled CLI tool. In this video, you will learn how to deploy the cloud-native application to our Kubernetes cluster running in Google Kubernetes engine. Now that we know how to use the kube-control command line tool, we can use it straight away to deploy the application to our Kubernetes cluster running on production. Before we do that, though, we first need to authenticate with GKE. Otherwise, we would not be able to deploy anything to it. We are going to use the gcloud command line tool to authenticate with our Kubernetes cluster in GKE. Let's do that now. With this command, we are going to get the credentials of our Kubernetes cluster. As you can see, we are specifying the name of the cluster, regional cluster, the project ID, and the region. With the authentication part done, let's first test whether we can reach and query the Kubernetes API. Yes, we can. As you can see, we could fetch information about the cluster nodes currently running on the cluster. Now let's deploy our application to it. As we already have the application's Docker image into container registry, this should be very easy to do. Let's do that. In this command, we are simply running the run kube-control command, specifying the application name and the image. With the application deployed, let's check the application logs now. As you can see, the application produced the Hello World message as expected. But if you recall from previous videos, the current Docker file does not really run the application. It simply runs an example script. If we really want to use the Flask application, we need to change the content of our Docker file and also the main py file, so that we can run the Flask web application framework in the background. Let's do that now. With these two lines of code, we are simply going to run the application whenever the main py file is executed. Now let's save it, close, and edit the Docker file instead. In the Docker file, we now need to specify an image which contains a compatible version of Python for our application to run. For this, we are going to use one of the most recent versions of Python, Python 3. Then, we need to add all of the files necessary for the application to run. This will be the requirements.txt file and the main.py file. Let's do that. And finally, we need to install the application dependencies, make the script executable, and set the application entry point. That's it. We can now save, commit, push, and wait for a new image to be built. After that, we will use that image to manually deploy the application to our cluster. With the changes pushed to our cloud source repository, let's switch to the GCP console and check whether a new build is running. The build is in progress. Let's wait for it to finish and to have a new application image pushed to Google Container Registry. OK, now that we have a new image pushed to Google Container Registry, let's delete the Kubernetes deployment we created earlier and create a new one. With the new deployment created, let's check the status of its pods. It seems the pod is running just fine. Let's now check the logs of our deployment instead. We should see a different output this time. This time we can see it's the Flask application that is generating the logs and it is running in the background. Our application is not currently accessible from anywhere, though. If we want to be able to access it from the outside world, we need to expose it. If you remember from the previous section, the expose command in kubectl allows us to do just that. Let's now expose our application by using this command. We will expose our app using a load balancer service, so we don't have to worry about future scalability requirements. We will have a single point from where to access the application. Let's create one. With the service created, let's see the status of our services in Kubernetes. As you can see, the external IP field is currently set to pending. What that means is GCP is currently provisioning a brand new load balancer for us. This should take a couple of minutes. Let's wait for it. Okay, now we have a public IP for our application. That means we should be able to access it at the specified port. I am going to use curl to access it, but you can also try it on your browser. It's up to you. Let's try to see whether we can access the application now. As you can see, the application is now accessible and we can see the app returning Hello World message.